Welcome everyone to the game between Jorden van Foreest and Nodirbek Abdusattorov at the Tata Steel Masters 2025. Both of them extremely uncompromising players, and this is going to be an epic game to watch. E4 by Jorden. Now whenever Jorden van Foreest plays, it's exciting to see his opening ideas. And the Caro-Kann chosen by Nodirbek. Wow. This is interesting. Nodirbek signals that he is here in for a fight. D4, D5 played. And now Jorden pushes his pawn to E5. The most ambitious move in the position, gaining space. And Nodirbek brings his bishop out to F5. There are many setups for white here. Jorden chooses to go C4, creating a tension in the position whether black should take or not. Black plays pawn to E6, opening up the bishop. One of the beautiful things about the Caro-Kann defense is that the bishop on F5 is outside the pawn chain. But on the other hand, you have very little space. Nodirbek plays bishop B4, an ambitious move. Knight E7 is the other main move to play here. But bishop B4, knight comes to E2. Very interesting. He's giving up a pawn here. D takes C4, knight G3. And this is a playable position for both sides. But Nodirbek keeps it simple, develops his knight. A question is asked to the bishop. Now a normal way to play this is to take and continue this with maybe dc4, and black is doing fine. But Nodirbek goes bishop a5, allowing space for white. B4 played. Nodirbek is risking this a bit right now because, firstly he gave white space with the pawn move to e5. Now more space on the queen side. B4, bishop comes back, and the knight moves to g3, attacking the bishop. It's okay perhaps to give this bishop and simply castle, because after take, black is doing very well. But Nodirbek wants to keep the bishop. Now keeping this bishop comes with its own problems, because now you can see how Jorden pushes his pawn to h4. He's just grabbing space, first in the center, then on the queen side, and now on the king side. Nodirbek plays h6. For the time being, he had to prevent h5, which would have almost trapped his bishop there. h6, and Jorden pushes the pawn, hesitates a bit, and now pushes it, h5. The bishop has made a luft for itself, bishop h7, but you can see now Anish Giri coming in there. It's looking bad for black. Queen g4 coming in. What a move, attacking g7. If you castle here, you'll get bamboozled with bishop h6. It's game over. You need to defend g7, so rook g8 played. But you can already sense that this is not a great position for black. Jorden simply develops his bishop to e2. He's doing very well out of the opening. And Nodirbek is lacking space, so he takes the pawn, at least creating a square for his knight here. The other knight could go from d7 to b6 to d5. Bishop takes c4 played. The d4 pawn can be slightly weak, but the bishop will come to e3 sooner or later. Now knight d7, trying to finish his development. It's cramped out there in the black camp. Jorden castles. And Nodirbek plays knight f5 and adjusts all the pieces there and presses the clock. He's like, now with my knight here, my other knight can move, my queen can keep moving, bishop comes out to e3. Clearly you don't want to take this bishop, because after fe3 just unleashes the rook on this beautiful file. Queen e7 is a logical move, and now just queen f3, or maybe bring the rooks to the center. But instead Jorden pushes the pawn to b5. This is a mistake, and Nodirbek does not take time to push forward. The main problem is here white cannot push d5 because his e5 pawn is hanging. That's the big problem. So he takes on f5, and it should be that the tactics should work here for white, because he's developed, has more space, everything. but it isn't. Somehow black is coordinating well. Now the b7 pawn is hanging, but look at Norbeck here. Just gets in the perfect move, long castle, and he's making his moves slowly and just emphasizing on every move. Knight jumps into d5. Oof. Wow. This move is super crazy. He takes it. He takes the knight on d5. Now, if you take on f5, c4 is hanging. But what's on Jordan's mind? Jordan simply takes the pawn and he's threatening bishop takes b7. So if you save the bishop, I take here king b8, bishop a6, and it's a forced mate. Wow. But Nodirbek finds an amazing move, king b8. The point being, now after take, I take here, and if you play bishop a6 threatening mate, I have just knight c5. That's the beauty of this idea. Nodirbek so sharp. Queen takes now the bishop. He takes the pawn on e5. And what a move this is. Because now d5 is hanging. He takes on e5. And from a very, very comfortable position here, Jordan has slipped into a very uncomfortable position. Because yes, the material is even, but look at this now. The pieces have been traded. Black is no longer cramped. And he gets the control of the d file. Fantastic chess there by Nodirbek. It's now, the position is flowing. It's very difficult to stop him from here. Queen comes back to e4. And it's time to break in the center with f6. You can see Nodirbek thinking and playing the move with his left hand now. f6 played. And if you push forward with e6, then I have f5 and this pawn will be rounded up pretty soon. So Jordan plays a4. But that is just like you're giving up a pawn. Now maybe f5 makes some sense. You know, keeping that thing, keeping the structure intact. But Jordan is saying, hey, Nodirbek, I'm going all out on the attack. I want to checkmate your king. But another fine move, queen e8. Now you are threatening to take because the queen is no longer hanging. And you're also attacking the pawn on b5. In comes b6. Oh, Jordan opening up the a file. How dangerous is this? Well, you can really scare any player with such play, but not Nodirbek Abdusattorov. He is someone who is fearless. AB, bishop takes b6. And the problem is you can't swing your queen over here. It will be traded. So right now the a file opening up isn't helping. fe5 played. And if you take rook e5, there's bishop f4 somehow to pin here. Although bishop c7 and black is still doing quite well. He went bishop c7 directly. He didn't take it. And now bishop f4, defending the pawn. You can see the times on the clock. 34 minutes for Jordan, 43 minutes for Abdusattorov. Rook d4 played. And he calmly presses the clock. Jordan wants to get to the a file, plays queen e2. Now preparing queen a2. But this is a mistake, and there are tactics in this position. It starts off with rook takes f4. So take, and you can see Nodirbek calculating. He's looking at these lines. Rook f4, queen e5. Now this is hanging, this is hanging. Two moves, queen a2 and rook a4. Let's start with rook a4. Here, you can't take the queen because it's a mate. So you give a check, king f1. You play check here, king f2. Check here, king e3, check here, king d3. And now once again a mate is threatened, but c4. You can't take with the rook, queen is hanging. King takes c4, queen h4, g4, b5, making square for the king. King takes b5, queen g5 check, king c6, queen f6 check, king b5. You give a check here, king goes back, check here, king goes back, and now take the queen. There is no more check. This is the variation Nodirbek is calculating. Now let's get back. After queen e5, if he plays queen a2, you can't take the rook, but in comes a check. Rook here, bishop pins it. Now, if you give a check, king here, check, pawn push, check, king up, check, pawn push, check. If you want to come out of the checks, king has to go here. If rook d1, king e5. Oh my goodness, king has no checks. And if you play queen b7, king c4, check, rook d5. No more checks. Rook c1, there is queen c1. Oh my goodness, he can actually take here. This is the position. Nodirbek is thinking still. But 12 minutes in, he's calculating everything. Look at his face. This guy is an absolute crunching monster. Calculations crunching monster. He is calculating rook f4, queen e5, and just thinking, boom, he takes it. Rook takes f4 on the board. Rook takes f4. And now he takes the pawn. Jorden has to decide between rook a4 and queen a2. Both the moves are losing. Which one is more complicated? Look at Jorden van Foreest closing his eyes there. He's hoping against hope that it works. Queen a2 played. But Nodirbek Abdusattorov has calculated this right up to the T. Queen e3 check. Presses the clock. The rook comes back to f2. And now, boom, bishop g3, making a luft for the king. And remember, if I can take here, you are just losing in the rook endgame, 2 pawns down. So check, Jorden has to give. You know, somewhere in your mind, you do believe that this king cannot survive out in the open. Queen a5 check. b6 played. Fantastic. Now you give a check. And he comes up. And look at Erwin Lamy there. Frederick Swanner. Everyone's looking at the game. Check here. And if you go back, it's a draw. And I mean, Jorden would be extremely happy with a draw. b5 played. And you can see Nodirbek, once he calculated that line, he is not even stopping to think. Now Jorden, good or bad, has to give the check. There is nothing else. He gives a check. Thai Daiwan joins in to watch. Erwin Lamy just can't leave the scene. He's like, what's going to happen next? It's like a thriller movie. King d5 played. Insane chess here by Nodirbek Abdusattorov. And now check again. This time Jorden down to 8 minutes on the clock. Nodirbek comes back and moves his king even further right into the enemy camp. Check again. This is the level of calculation for a 2770 player. World class player. Now rook a2 defending. So at least for the timing you're not trading, but you are 2 pawns down. He takes on f2. Rook takes f2. And it's time to start pushing the queenside pawns. Nodirbek plays first queen d4, keeping everything calm and controlled. The rook is pinned here. He plays his king up to h2. A big threat, by the way. Rook f4 would net the queen. So Nodirbek plays his queen to e5. King comes back to g1. And pawn king b4. Oof, king to b4 played. You can again see rook b2 impossible because the queen controls the square. And he plays rook to f1. Now rook to d2. So if you give a check, I'm just going to block with rook b2. And there are no more checks in the position somehow. And he resigns. What a game by Nodirbek. Jorden van Foreest asks, I think, about rook f a4 and check. And I think they are discussing this line. Nodirbek seems to have seen all of it. And he's so excited to share his findings with his opponent. After the game, Fiona interviewed Nodirbek, and there also he spoke about these lines and it was unbelievable to see him calculating this way. We're going to show you that moment where Nodirbek speaks about that in the interview. But one must just simply tip one's hat to Nodirbek Abdusattorov. The guy is world number 5 and he's moving ahead, and he is a world class player for a reason, and this game amply showed it why.
Yeah, here Queen E2, I had to calculate these long variations, but I was a little bit lucky. Like here, for example, he has this rook, instead of Queen A2, he has this rook FA4, after which I had to play like Queen H2, King F1. I calculated this long forced line, Rook E8, King D3, C4, take, Queen H4, G4,
Crazy
B5.
stuff.
Yeah, King B5, and it continues till King C6, and I have Queen F6 here, after which I win.
What goes on in your mind when you calculate such a line and you see it all works out and it's such a beautiful line?
Yeah, I had a feeling it should work out because, you know,
Does it give you some satisfaction, some positive energy during
yes,
the game?
I mean, partly because I always like to calculate, so I try to find this kind of, lines. So yeah, it was very pleasant during the game to find out this Queen F6.